Hello and welcome to another episode of hapipadi interviews. My name is Father Sani Castillo, hapipadi, and we are delighted and honored to have today an opportunity to hang out and have a conversation with Father Mateo Zamora, OSB. OSB. Father Mateo, thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview you today. I'm very excited for this interview because I think it's going to be helpful for many of you out there who have no idea what the monastic life is all about and what it means when somebody is a monk. And so Father Mateo is a newly professed monk. How long have you been in the monastery now, Father Mateo?
Well, not including my novitiate, I would have been simply professed a year in August.
1 year in August, so he's fresh into the monastery. What is interesting about him is that he has been a priest, a diocesan priest for a while for the Diocese of Lexington, Kentucky, and then after some time of discernment, after serving in Lexington, Kentucky for
10 years.
10 years, a solid 10 years of pastoral ministry as a priest, he discerned to shift into the monastic life, which to me is like, wow, that's something that I would have loved to do, but I'm still discerning that. So even for me, this is going to be helpful for understanding what a monk's life is like and what that's all about when you enter the monastery. So perhaps the first question to ask is, so can you give us a little idea what your day-to-day life might look like? What sort of routines happen in the monastery when you begin?
Well, that's the thing about the monastery. We have what you call an horarium, which is the schedule of prayer and work in the monastery, and that is one of the aims of the Benedictine spirituality, a balance of ora et labora, prayer and work, and so it can be quite regimented, and because you would have all of the hours for the liturgy, and that includes, waking up very early, 5:30 in the morning, for vigils and lauds, followed by breakfast in silence, and then after breakfast you would have a period of what we would call Lectio Divina, time for spiritual reading, and then we would have Mass at 7:30 in the morning. After Mass, then we would have what you would call the work periods. We would, those who teach in the seminary would teach in the school. Those who have other jobs on the hill, the Archabbey of St. Meinrad is on a hill, so we call it the hill. They would do their jobs then. We interrupt that work with noonday prayer. So we would gather together again at the Archabbey Church for noonday prayer, followed by lunch, in which people can talk and can catch up during the middle of the day, and then we go back to work, only to have again at 5 o'clock Vespers. After Vespers, we would have another period of Lectio Divina, spiritual reading, before we have supper together, or the main meal, the dinner. And dinner, we would usually have what we would call table reading. So it would be in silence, except that the reader would be reading, first of all, a chapter from the Rule, a passage from the Rule actually, a reading from the Rule of St. Benedict, the Martyrology, whose feast, whose saint we're celebrating the next day, and the necrology, which monk had died, whose anniversary we would remember the next day. And then there would be what you call table reading. A lot of times it would be spiritual reading, or other times it would be a history, or a book of some significance. After that, after dinner, we would gather together in the calefactory, which is kind of like a huge sitting area, living room, for recreation, or as we would call it, forced fun. You have to be there, and some people would take a walk on the hill, catch up, or other people would just sit around on the rocking chairs and chat. And I usually play board games with some of the other monks. And then, of course, we would have at 7 p.m. Compline, night prayer. After Compline, then you're free to do, for those who are students, study, do their assignments, teachers prepare their lessons for the next day, and others would actually go to bed because we have to wake up for 5:30 the next day. But grand silence starts at 10 a.m., 10 p.m. should I say, and so by 10 p.m. there should be silence on the whole.
Dead silence.
In the monastery. But that is basically the daily horarium, the daily schedule. Sunday is a little different. We get to sleep in a little, and vigils and laws is
nice.
7:15 in the morning, and mass is at 9:30, and there won't be any work periods. But more or less that would be kind of the horarium or the daily routine. For some people, that can be quite regimented.
It sounds regimented.
Very scheduled. But, the whole idea here is that every hour is devoted specifically for prayer or for work. There are times for recreation, there are times for fun, but there's always that insistence on that balance. You don't just, what am I gonna do today? No, there's always a pursuit of balance in one's life.
So that's really cool, because the structure of your day is already in some way created for you in order to function normally without having to think about what you're gonna do next. So it creates a system of life or a rule of life where you don't have to worry about what you're gonna do next. You just kind of prepare yourself internally to go from one thing to another. So is there a lot of ringing of bells that goes on in the monastery?
Well, the novices and the juniors are the ones who ring the bells, and the bells are rung to announce the what we would call the hours. Well, every 15 minutes, every quarter, it's automated. The bells will ring. But for the liturgies, they are still hand rung by the novices and the junior monks, and so much so. For example, like an OA, Officium Abbatis, the office of the abbot, which is basically Christmas or Easter. You would have all 6 bells being rung.
Oh, wow.
So you need basically
That's
4
enough.
people to ring all 4 bells. But they're also used to signal, for example, a death of a monk. So when the bell is tolled, then that is a reminder for everyone. You would be walking or you'd be working, and you hear the bell toll, and you're basically saying someone has died.
Okay.
And
So it's kind of like the bell becomes a sort of a code that tells them some messages, or tells them what to do next, or if there's something big that's happening in the monastery, then the bell becomes the sort of the voice that tells everybody about that. Wow, I don't know, because for us, the diocesan priests, it's impossible. It's really truly impossible to create that kind of a regimented system of life, because every day for the priest like myself who's in the parish is not gonna definitely be able to observe that as strictly as when you were in the monastery. So I think
you could try. You
Yeah.
could try, right? But the charism, I should say, of the diocesan priesthood is a charism of surprise.
surprise.
Because it's not like you can't tell if you get a call from the hospital and someone is dying, you can't say, I'm sorry, but that is not in the schedule. He or she, this dying person is ruining my regimen. No,
Yes.
people come at inopportune times because they have needs, and that is the gift of the diocesan priest, to be available to the people of God when they are in need, spiritually, and in need, for example, especially the poor, materially. So that is a specific charism. Our charism is to pray basically for the church and with the church, especially for the times when when you get too busy to pray. We try to cover for you.
Thank you very much. I need it. because it's true. Sometimes even in my own life as a diocesan priest, sometimes meeting goes longer than normal. A visit to the hospital goes longer than normal. Or you get doing confessions after confessions after confessions certain days, and before you know it, you missed to do your midday prayer or your mid-afternoon prayer, or even sometimes your vespers, especially when the meeting is long, and sometimes you're combining your vespers with your night prayer. But that won't happen in the monastery because you have that regimented life that allows you to really function by an hour-to-hour basis, which I love. That the whole idea of not having to worry about when you begin from one item of activity to the next item of activity, it just flows kind of like very, very fluidly in the monastery then like that. Huh?
There was a visitor at the monastery who was speaking to our abbot, Father Abbot Kurt, and said, well, I've noticed, why do you let your work, why do you let your prayer interrupt your work? Because, why don't you keep on going until you finish whatever you need to do? Why do you have to go to evening prayer or vespers, for example, or do noonday prayer? And Father Abbot reminded this visitor that actually it's not that our prayer interrupts our work, but it is our work that interrupts our prayer. So the hours, the liturgy, the hours are there set, very regimented, because they are the ones that we commit ourselves to. We prefer that prayer. We do it for the church and with the church, and the work is basically what we do in order to support those times of prayer. In the diocesan priesthood, it really is a lot of times it is the work, it is the prayer that interrupts the work, because emergencies happen, meetings get long, and so you try to find a time for that prayer, as opposed for us, we try to find the time for work because the prayer is already set.
That's awesome. And that's just two different ways of life, but two ways of serving the church and serving God. Neither one is, I think they're supposed to complement each other. But I think for the purpose of our viewers, it might be a good idea to give them just enumerate how many times within the day do you actually ring the bell to go back to the chapel, to the Archabbey Church to actually pray. So you begin at what time in the morning?
5:30 in the morning.
You have 5:30 for what?
Vigils and lauds.
Vigils and lauds.
So at 5:15 in the morning, the bells will be rung for 15 minutes. So
you
if
sure
you
need
did
that
wake up
15 minutes.
5 minutes before, there's 15 minutes in which you have to wake up and get cleaned up and
That's the nagging bell.
go to the church.
Okay, so you got a 5:30 and then
7:30 mass.
7:30
So
mass.
that's 5 minutes before mass. The
Okay.
bells will be rung, and then midday prayer 5 minutes before midday prayer.
When is midday prayer? What
That's
time is that?
noon.
Noon. Oh, obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Noon.
And then 5 o'clock vespers.
Yeah,
So
5 o'clock vespers.
15 minutes before that we will ring, and then and of course there's compline.
There's a compline. So that's a five times in a day the bells are being rung. In the breviary there is that mid-morning and mid-afternoon prayer that some people do. And
Yeah.
are those do you presume to do that on your own, or sometimes those are not made because they're not made
If someone has that devotion, they could.
Okay, because those are not the main.
But for us, the 5 times that we pray as a community.
Okay.
So we gather together. So remember, there's those times of spiritual reading, Lectio
Right.
Divina, and so those are times of private prayer.
I see.
And so basically, you have 7 times of 7 periods of prayer during the day.
But imagine the privilege though of being able to pray, in such specific schedules throughout the day where nobody will tell you to do something else but simply pray as part of your actual duty, as a person to the church, and then you have enough time to read. I mean, I sometimes don't have time to read, so you have time to read, and then you also have time to do some work, doing whatever task you're assigned to do in the monastery during the day, and then you also have time for some fun, forced or not. That sounds like a real balanced life, if you ask me. What one curiosity that I have is, how do you respond to people that say that when you go to the monastery, you kind of are basically running away from the world, and when you're in the monastery, you're no longer in real life. You're confined in this small space for most of your life. You don't have a lot of quote unquote direct contact with the outside world. I don't know how you respond to that.
Well, we have contact with the world because people visit the Archabbey a lot. People would come for retreats and stuff like that. Now we don't. There's 2 TVs, but there's very specific times when you can watch television. And usually people would do that to watch news, the news, but not really the same kind of exposure that you would have in the diocesan priesthood. I recall that there's this beautiful scene in the movie The Bells of St. Mary's when the nun, played by Ingrid Bergman, was talking to this young girl who was thinking about entering the nunnery, and the nun, played by Ingrid Bergman, reminded the little girl, you don't join the nunnery because you're running away from something. It's because you've found something. And I think that would be basically what we would have in the monastery. The men who are the monks in the monastery, they didn't enter the St. Meinrad because they're running away from something, but because they have found something. And one of our vows as Benedictine monks is a vow of stability. We make a vow that we would stay there in that monastery. This will be our home. And so it's very interesting because, especially for us, Benedictine monks of St. Meinrad, our vocation is not to the order, but it is to a place. So we commit ourselves to be stable in that place. And it's not, for example, for the order, wherever the order will send you, no. But we commit ourselves to be in this place and to hallow that place with our prayer.
Amazing.
And it's also not just the place, but also the community that resides in that place. So a lot of times people, kind of like, I can't live with these people anymore. But really, we try to make it work. We try to, in many ways, be a sacrament of God's family. How we, coming from very different backgrounds, many different places, many languages, choose, by God's grace, to live together for the rest of our lives and not kill each other. That itself is, I think, a witness
to the
kingdom of heaven.
Very good. Okay, wow. I'm really, even me, it's very enlightening to hear directly about these kinds of things because, Father Mateo is a friend of mine, and we've been friends for, I don't know how long, over 20 years now.
Since graduate school at Ateneo.
At the Ateneo de Manila in the Philippines. And I'm the one who's supposed to be responsible for his vocation, in the sense that I was the one who invited him into the diocesan priesthood. And look at where he is today, as a monk of St. Meinrad. Another one important clarification I think that we need to maybe perhaps relate to the audience is that the difference between the different monasteries, even within the United States or around the world, the differences between different kinds of Benedictine monasteries, because it's obviously there are many differences. There's some varieties of monasteries depending on the focus of their community and the level of connection that they have with the world. So, for example, you might have heard words, Trappist or maybe Kamaldoli. Have you heard about those kinds of communities?
Okay.
But you are a
We're Benedictine.
you're a Benedictine.
Each house is independent. So, but like for example, you mentioned the Trappists. The Trappists, although they follow the rule of Saint Benedict, they're actually OCSO, Order of the Cistercians of the strict observance, and so they follow the rule in strictly, for lack of a better word. And then the Camaldoli, they also are a branch of the Benedictines. So each one has, we may follow the same rule of life, but the interpretation is different. And even like for example, Saint Meinrad belongs to what you call the Swiss American congregation, and basically these are Benedictine houses, Benedictine monasteries founded by monks from Switzerland. So the two big mother houses basically are Conception Abbey in Missouri and St. Meinrad in southern Indiana. And both of them have founded different daughter houses all across the United States and beyond, actually. And so we all have our roots in Switzerland, basically.
Wow.
But each house is independent. It's not like, for example, the Archabbey at St. Meinrad can tell St. Joseph's in Louisiana how to run their house. No, each one is different. And each house, as you say, may have a different specific charism. So at St. Meinrad, our charism has been the education of and formation of priests. So we have the seminary. We also have, for a long time, the Abbey Press, but we closed that several years ago. And so publication, evangelization. We do have several priests, several monks who are priests who help with parishes, but they're a lot fewer than we've had in past decades. So each place has a specific focus. Like for example, a friend of mine, my next door neighbor, Brother Aloysius, who is a visiting monk, we would say, from St. Anselm Abbey. Now he belongs to a different congregation of the Benedictine order. They run St. Anselm College. So they have that is their specific ministry, should we say. So each Benedictine house has a different ministry to the church.
So that means if you'd like to be a Benedictine or if you would like to be a monk, and you have a specific idea of what you would like to be doing as a monk, for example, if you feel called to do a specific thing as a monk, you may choose from as maybe as specific as being a someone who is completely removed from the world. Maybe you can become a hermit, a Benedictine hermit. Is that correct to say, Benedict?
No, well, you don't choose to be a hermit.
Okay.
Because the rule
Okay.
of Saint Benedict actually says that you can only be a hermit after you have lived in community for a while.
Oh, is that okay? So, yeah.
Because you don't become a hermit because you're antisocial.
Right, exactly.
But basically, a hermit is someone who has, at least what the rule says, who has been able to live in community and is now ready on his own to do battle, as we would say, do spiritual warfare in the desert, in the wilderness.
Yeah, so
So following the
desert
charism
part.
of John the Baptist.
Right.
So it's not like you enter the monastery and say I want to be a hermit. No, the monastery actually kind of says
You're not ready to be a hermit.
You're not ready to be a hermit. And there's a story of, and of course, there may be a time in which you would say, maybe I'm done with being a hermit, and you would return to the community. I remember one, I can't remember which one it was, a spiritual father who had said, the thing about, it's easy to live alone as a hermit, for example, because you only have to deal with yourself, right?
Wrong.
But it's a bigger challenge in many ways to live with other people,
So,
because
community.
When I was in the parish, I would usually tell people that there are two kinds of monks. There's a saint, and there's the saint maker. So the saint is the one who's very holy, but there is that other monk who is the saint maker, who drives this person insane, by sometimes it's not on purpose, just because of their particular behavior and personality, but because the monk responds in charity. That's how he becomes a saint, And so it is thanks to that saint maker that monk becomes a saint. And our novice master, Father Garrick, likes to remind us, if somebody really annoys you and drives you absolutely mad, perhaps God has put that person there for your salvation.
Oh, I say that to my own people, especially for husbands and wives, are having a problem sometimes in their relationship. It's the same thing. Wherever you are in relationships, the relationships given to you usually are opportunities for your own develop growth in the spirit. So whatever it is, you'll grow in charity and in martyrology, if you want to call it that. So that's really cool. I like the idea that you don't make a decision to go to become a hermit. It's something that kind of develops as you enter into the spiritual life, as you enter into the life of the order. And it's not like, because I think one of the biggest misconceptions out there is that you're going into the hermitage because you don't like people around you. I think that's a big misconception. And also they say that you're going into the hermitage and you no longer care about anybody else in the world. I think going into the hermitage is a deeper level of commitment and also communion or communio with the rest of the universe. It's a whole different way of life and a whole different spirituality altogether. And it is for sure something that you're called to be instead of something you choose to do for yourself.
Or that you're sent to do.
Thinking it's a way for you to make a preference of your lifestyle. It's not really, doesn't begin from that. So that's beautiful. What would you, for you as a monk right now, because you've been in the monastery for about a year.
And my novitiate before that, so basically 2 years.
So almost 2 years now. So when you look at everything that you've done and your experience in the monastery for 2 years, what would come up in your memory as maybe the fun moments in the monastery that for you as a monk?
I think in fun moments.
Fun in the sense of things that you like to enjoy doing in the monastery.
I mean, whenever we have recreation, that's always fun because we would have sequence. We would play sequence, and let's just say people can be quite competitive, and so it's just funny, just because you could spend hours probably playing sequence, but we only have 20 minutes, and we make it
worth it.
We make it count, and I think that's kind of the thing. It becomes enjoyable because it's just the right amount of fun. It doesn't get it's the right amount of competition, and it doesn't get really brutal. We don't allow it to get brutal. The time does not allow us to do that. And I would say just the times that we would spend praying together and working together has been it's not people's idea of fun, but it's certainly it's a joy, fun is fleeting, joy abides and remains, and I think that's kind of what I relish in the monastic life. You have that joy today, and you can anticipate to have that joy tomorrow, and share it with your community. So.
Awesome. So here's the part of this interview and this conversation where I think I'm just gonna go for what Boy Abunda would call the fast talk.
Lord.
I'm gonna make you choose between two things, and yes, you don't have to explain it, just make a choice or something like that. And or I might have to ask you a question that will all require a very short, simple answer. How about that? 10 questions, everybody, okay? For Father Mateo Zamora, all right? I'm still not used to calling him Father Mateo because Mateo is his religious order name. He has a different name before he entered and got professed in the monastery. So I still call him by his nickname that I'm used to calling him as a friend.
Which you don't have to mention.
I don't have to mention in this interview.
Because that is dead,
All right, so here we go. Fast talk, or 10 questions for Father Mateo. Number one, lauds or vespers?
Vespers.
Okay, silence or talking?
Both.
No, you gotta choose one.
No.
Whichever one kind of comes to edges the other one a little bit. There has to be something. Talking or silence?
Silence, bro.
Silence. Okay. You see, there's always that one little thing that kind of edges over. How about doing reading or actually teaching what you read?
Teaching.
See, he is a teacher. He's a teacher by heart, because right now you're doing a lot of this teaching stuff going on everywhere, right? Because the Archabbey also has a seminary.
And we also have the seminary.
So he's actually doing a lot of formation work and seminars with oblates all throughout the United States now. He goes around and addresses the oblates, the lay oblates in the order of Saint Benedict. So great. Also, fasting or doing an actual work of penance.
Work of penance. I love eating.
We love eating. Filipinos, we love eating.
Where 2 Filipinos are gathered, or 2 or 3 Filipinos are gathered, there must be food.
There must be food, correct. As a monk right now, what is the most important work that you're doing in one line?
Pray.
Pray. Okay. Another question is, how many hours of vacation do you actually get? Do you actually get out of the monastery, and how long is that? If you ever have a time to visit your family?
We get 2 weeks in a year, and but your family can also come and visit, and that's not counted with the vacation.
Cool.
But sometimes you have to remind your family. Goes both ways. But I've been able. My family was able to visit me for my vows, and actually around Labor Day, since I'll be in New York to direct a retreat for the oblates there, I'll be able to visit my sister and her family in New Jersey, and my parents are there right now, so I'll be able to spend time with them.
Very good. This might be an unfair question, but Father Mateo and myself were born and raised in the Philippines, and came here after our college days. So the question would be Philippines or the United States?
Unfair.
Okay.
Saint Meinrad, because I have a vow stability to the abbey. Okay.
It is an unfair question, even for me at this point, but I love the Philippines. What can I say? Also, maybe how about if you have one day of just doing whatever it is that you would like to do, for yourself, where would you go and why?
Broadway and watch a musical.
All day, all night musical. That's what he's gonna do. And finally, what are your what are the basic contents of your prayers these days? Now that you're in the monastery and you're doing this work,
What do you mean?
the content. What do you pray for the most these days? Your own personal prayers that you do. Where do you gravitate toward praying right now when you're doing petitions and whatnot?
Well, right now, my spiritual reading is the Reflections on the Our Father by Gerhard Loffink.
Okay.
And so that is inspiring me to see the Lord's Prayer in a new way, and it's very powerful because it reminds us, especially just by the address of it, Our Father. So family, not just my own personal family, but I would say the church family, and certainly like the parish families that I've had before I entered the monastery. So around this time, it's May, and soon it'll be June. I also keep in mind the couples that I had prepared for marriage and whose weddings I had presided over. When I was in the parish, in my dining room, I had the photos of each of the couples that I prepared for marriage, which I don't have that luxury anymore, but because I promised them that I would pray for them every day. And so around this time, a lot of them are celebrating their wedding anniversary, so I'm thinking about them a lot.
That's awesome. Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank Father Mateo Zamora for gracing the occasion of saying yes to the interview that I asked him to do in the middle of dinner last night. So I bribed him for dinner in order for him to say yes to this interview.
The ossobuco was worth it.
So we're happy to have him in this particular episode. Maybe finally, I want to just kind of offer an invitation out there for anyone, young men who are looking to discern serving the Lord, serving God in a special way in your life, and offering who you are to the service of the church and to God's people. I know that there are many out there who are making this discernment, or who probably are feeling called but don't know where to begin to ask the questions. So this is one way of reaching out to you guys, and hopefully this will be able to help you clarify some of the questions you have about, what would you like, where were you feeling called to respond to the service of the Lord. So whether you become a diocesan priest or a monk in the monastery, it's all good for the greater glory of God, and it is all good for the church. So if there's any question whatsoever, feel free to leave a message or let us know. You can contact Saint Meinrad Archabbey. What is how do you
spell Saint Meinrad? Saint. Meinrad is Meinrad. But Saint Meinrad is not only just for monks. It's also a place of pilgrimage. So everyone is invited to come visit the Holy Hill and come for retreats. Come to visit the shrine of Our Lady of Einsiedeln or Our Lady of Monte Cassino. Come pray with us. We have beautiful grounds. It's a place of prayer and peace. So it's not just discernment to a monastic way of life. And we were talking before about the oblates. The oblates are not, I guess the closest we could explain it, the simplest we could explain it, they're not really third order members, but they're like third order members of the Benedictine monks. But there are men and women who are inspired to follow the Benedictine spirituality and live it out, in their own lives out there in the world. That seeking that balance of prayer and work in their own lives. So I work with the oblates as we have mentioned. And that's one aspect that probably you might be called to do. You don't have to be in the monastery to seek that balance of prayer and work. You can also try to strive for it in the context of your home and at your work. So.
And on that note, I want to say again thank you to Father Mateo Zamora, and this is Father San Castillo, hapipadi, and greeting you all God's blessings and wishing you to live happy, healthy, and holy. And God bless you all. Thank you for joining us.